Okay, welcome to the next edition of the Jerry Acuff Show. Today, we are really fortunate to have Gary Pittard with us. Gary is a person that I met 3 or 4 years ago when he reached out to me after reading one of my books and had me on his TV show. Yes, Gary has a TV show. Golly, he is an accomplished person. So accomplished that last spring, when I found out he was in San Diego and I was in Phoenix, I flew over there, and he was kind enough to let me have a 3-hour lunch with him, and he and I have become very good friends since then. But Gary is a sales expert extraordinaire for starters, and as I mentioned, a friend of mine. He's also one, for my money, and I would think probably easy to prove, the leading real estate consultancy in Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. And so his whole expert is helping real estate agencies succeed in 3 very important and yet different markets. He consults on everything that's associated with real estate. He trains on everything that any real estate agent or agency would need. He has online tools, and he has online training. And I will also tell you that when you look back in history, he'll be written as one of the pioneers in the subscription mode of getting and keeping clients. I came to this party about how do you actually create in a subscription business by selling things over the internet about 1.5 years ago. Gary came to it 30 years ago. He also has Pittard TV, providing expertise to his clients from some of the top experts in the world. He's written a book called Why Winners Win, which I promise you is must reading for everyone. It's not a very difficult read. It won't take you long to read it, but it really does boil down what it takes to be successful in life, and it's a must read. He's the managing director of Pittard. He's spoken to over 10,000 people. He is my friend, and welcome, Gary Pittard.
Thanks, Jerry. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
So, Gary, you have this really successful business in Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia, and leading a powerful real estate consultancy firm. If you could think about 3 things that you've learned about what it takes to be a winner, and I know this is included in your book. It's more than 3, but if you had to boil it down to sort of, 3 of the most important things, what things would you share with our audience that is necessary to be a winner?
Well, actually, I think there's probably 4, Jerry, that go pretty close together. The first is attitude. Now, with a healthy attitude where the pursuit of excellence is a priority, you do what it takes to succeed. So you'll define success and what it means to you, and you'll set a deadline for its achievement. You'll plan and you'll follow that plan, and then you'll seek out people who can help you achieve the success that you plan to achieve. The next is knowledge. You'll learn what you need to learn. Then on top of that, there's skill. You'll practice what you learn so that skill develops. And then that leads to the 4th, which is competent action. I love the saying that if you make something foolproof, somebody will invent a better fool. I also love the saying that if you take an incompetent person and get him or her to increase their level of action, all you have is a hardworking idiot.
Right.
So our actions have got to be competent, don't they? Sales actions need to be performed competently. I might know what to do, but does that mean I know how to do it well? I need to practice to perfect my technique. So knowledge plus practice equals skill. I might learn to fly a plane by going to a flight simulator, and I might be able to take off and land. I might be able to do instrument approaches. But how would you feel with you and your family sitting in the plane with me on my first flight in a real plane? It's only when I get out there and I get the feel of the aircraft, the control surfaces, what it's like in a crosswind, when it starts to stall, what its characteristics are. It's actually by flying it that I develop the skill. So theoretical knowledge is good, and it's a great start, but without the practice, it doesn't turn to skill, does it?
No. So the knowledge and practice is what leads to the skill development.
That's right. Yeah. So with a good attitude, you'll learn what you need to learn. You'll get out and you'll practice, and your actions will become competent, and turn that knowledge into skill.
And so that skill development, though, has to lead to competent, adequate action, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think even somebody that's been in their career for a good long time, it doesn't mean that their actions all the time are competent. I think this is where the attitude of the pursuit of excellence really comes into it. When I first started my career, I started in the hotel industry, so I worked in bars and hotels with some really switched on business people. And I remember several of them. They wouldn't even tolerate so much as a blown light bulb. They'd say, you got to change the light bulbs every day. And I looked at it once, and it was like a chandelier, and it might have had 20 light bulbs in it. And I said, well, what's the difference if just one of them's out? There's still plenty of light. And they said, that's not the point. The point is, it shows a lack of care. If one light bulb's gone, next thing you know, it's two, it's three. The next thing you look as though you're going broke. And they said, we've got to have standards, and we stick to those standards every day. And valuable lesson, I thought. And it's this mentality, isn't it? It's this pursuit of excellence that when we do something, we want to do it well. And this really is an attitude that we need to take to every task, because close enough isn't good enough to a winner. Whatever we do, we want to do well. I see that in your work, Jerry. I've seen that in interactions with you, and I see it with every winner I've ever met. At some point, they made a decision to part company with mediocrity and to pursue excellence. And I think that's the hallmark of every winner that I've ever met. I'm sure you'd probably feel the same way.
Yeah, but I'm not as eloquent as saying it as you are. I mean, just the phrase, the pursuit of excellence is a priority, is one of the most powerful 5-word phrases I've ever heard. I talk a lot about mindset, and I'm talking tomorrow to, a bunch of people from Johnson & Johnson, and I will use this phrase and give you credit for it. And I love that your follow-up question is, do we pursue excellence because to pursue excellence, you do have to part company with mediocrity. And this is why, if you're listening, for God's sakes, get this book. This Why Winners Win, because everything Gary's talking about is in this book. But I just love that formula. I was just fascinated. My boss used to say, if you hire a dud and train them, you have a trained dud. And so I think you're right. I mean, you can take somebody who's working hard, but if they're doing the wrong things, they're not going to be successful.
That's so true. Yeah, it's so true.
Well, you're, and I, as you know, I know an awful lot of people have been in the business world for an awful long time. But honestly, you are one of the most forward-thinking and innovative sales experts I've ever met. What inspires you to think so far ahead?
Thanks, Jerry. I don't look on myself as any type of Elon Musk. I don't look on myself as a visionary. I think actually what you do so well is, in my opinion, the key to thinking ahead, at least ahead of your competition. I'll give you an example. Jerry, when we first met face-to-face, you asked me a question, what can I do to help you? And you also introduced me to Leah Haben-Woodford, the CEO of SmartFem. And she mentioned to me that when you met her, you asked her the same question, what can I do to help you? And I think that what you do is the key to inspiration and foresightedness. That is, talk to people, go out of your way to help them. You're a master at this, and I, for one, appreciate it. I'll give you an example of how this works. I was talking to a marketing expert about webinars, and I said to him, I wish I could show video live, just show video when I'm presenting a live webinar. Now, allegedly you can, but there's a lot of buffering, and showing video over webinar is very clunky. Now, this marketing expert turned out was talking to somebody at the gym, and the person that the marketing expert was talking to was a guy who sold webinar software. So we were introduced to one another, and 2 weeks later we met. Now, it turned out this guy was hopeless. He was late for appointments twice, and twice he blamed me for getting the time wrong. His demonstration was hopeless, and his product was far inferior to the Citrix product I was using, and still used to this day. I think Citrix's service is exemplary. But he asked me this one question in this interview that didn't go anywhere, that didn't result in a sale, that I thought was a total waste of time. He said to me, "Why don't you webcast?" And I said to him, "What's that?" Now, this was after Periscope, which didn't do so well in Australia, but it was well before Facebook Live and the others that followed. And when he said that, webcasting was live or pre-recorded video streamed over the internet, I could immediately see an application for my clients and for my business. And I often wondered where we'd be today, where my company would be today, if I answered his question, "Why don't you webcast?" with an ego approach instead of curiosity. For example, if I'd have said, "Oh yes, we've considered that," acting as though I knew what webcasting was, instead of displaying my ignorance and asking, "What's that? What's webcasting?" These days, the older I get, I just don't mind asking questions, even if admitting that I don't know, even if it means I don't know something. If you give the other party an opportunity to feel superior, that's not such a bad thing, and very few people will take advantage of it. Those worth bothering with will try to help you understand. And it's in those lessons that you learn things that can rocket your business ahead of the competition. Now, within 3 weeks of that competition, we invested $40,000 into equipment, and we conducted our first webcast, and Pittard TV was born. Now, that was in July 2014, and since then, we've conducted close to 30 webcasts with some of the finest business minds in the world, you included, Jerry, streamed live to audiences across 5 time zones. So we became a different company that day.
Well, and I remember our discussions too, because first place, you're a delight to be with. But the second thing is, you have so many of these good ideas. And I've been actually now looking at a new space in our office for us to put our own studio in, very much like you've done. My old boss used to say to me, "When you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you're rotting." And, I'm this believer that in today's day and age, where there's so much information coming at us, that if we're not all in constant pursuit of new ideas and new knowledge, then we're going to get left behind. The great news about technology is, and I introduced you to Steve Cunningham, his service enables me to do 100 book summaries of business books a year. I do 2 a week. That's 100 book summaries I'm reading now. I might wind up buying 10% of those books and read them, but I'm getting exposed to so much more information because of technology. I subscribe to 4 or 5 blogs, I really do think that your idea of being a good listener and being curious is absolutely critical. That sort of leads me to, go ahead, were you going to say something?
I just think that you just never know where it's going to lead. Before Pittard TV, there was iTrain, which is our Pittard's on-demand streaming portal, and it's the way we deliver our training now. And when we first started, we used to go into a recording studio, record on reel-to-reel tape. The technician would cut and splice the tape during the editing process. Then he'd give us a recording master from which we produce cassettes. Then we moved to CDs, and now we stream. So the idea for iTrain came from a throwaway line from my bank manager. And we implemented that within 2 months and revolutionized the way we deliver training to our clients. So the funny thing is, neither the webinar provider nor the bank manager would remember saying what they said to make me think differently. I just think when you talk to people, you learn things. And when you read and study, you learn things. And you never know where that's going to take you. And it certainly will give you more opportunity, I think, to determine trends well into the future.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, I'm developing an app called Really Linked, which I think I told you about.
Yes.
Which is still 2 glitches away from being perfect. But I got the idea from talking to a basketball coach about his calendar. And he has these activities every day on his calendar. Call 1 person, text 1 person, email 1 person, write 1 person, 30 minutes of yoga, read 3 chapters in a book, and meditate. And he does all that like between 4 and 6 in the morning. But my point is, I'm saying to myself, why don't you have a technology solution that makes that easy? So we created this thing called Really Link, which enables you to take your most important contacts and put them in the app, and you can call them, text them, email them, or request a meeting with them without going to any other app in your phone. And so you're 100% right. You don't know where the ideas come from. I do think that there's certain people who are better ideators than others. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there are, but I think that's a muscle that you can work too. You know, the more you listen and the more you try things, you know, we say in Australia, have a go. The more you try things, you know, the more likely you are to work that those idea muscles. And I think sometimes people stop themselves from trying things out, and I think as a result of that, they don't get, you know, they don't. Who knows when which idea is going to be the one that's going to rocket you to stardom? Who knows which is going to give you the success of your dreams? You just never know. And I think try a lot of them out. I learned with our app iTrain. You know, we took it to market, and we were prepared for the fact that it might not be perfect. We sought feedback from our users, and we watched the feedback closely. As it turns out, you know, the launch was hugely successful. Our first launch was bug free, and we took feedback from there and started improving it as we go. And you know, we're now working on version 2.0. I've always wanted to have a 2.0 of something. but it's just feedback from your users. You know, they'll tell you what they want and how they want things to work. So I've even given up on total perfection. I just launch and let's listen to what our users have to say.
Yeah, as long as you're willing to correct whatever the things that need to be corrected, that's all that really matters. So
yeah.
In all of your dealings with these tens of thousands of salespeople that you deal with in these real estate agencies, what are 2 or 3 of the biggest mistakes you see people making that keep them from being more successful in sales?
It's a good question, Jerry. I think the biggest mistake is a trap for experienced people, and that's the I've heard it all before or been there, done that syndrome. Do you find that there's a lot of salespeople who reach a level of experience where suddenly training is beneath them?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous attitude. You know, I think with training you should reach a point where you've heard most of it, but so what? It's not what you've heard that's important. Knowledge is only part of the journey. Competent actions leads to results, and your actions are only competent when you train regularly. You know, Jerry, with all your experience in sales, you're a sales master. You still have a lifelong learning habit. You as you say, you know, you go through all of those book summaries and you read books. You're constantly training, and a lot of the training that you do, I think we reach a point where training doesn't offer up so many new things to us, many new ideas. It serves to remind us of what we should be doing. And if you begin using an idea that you know, but you weren't using until reinforcement training reminded you to use that idea again, and that idea makes you a sale, then wouldn't you say that the training's done its job?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we hear a lot about disruptive change in our industry. But I think there's something that will disrupt our career more than anything, such as an Uber or an Airbnb, and that is ignorance and rusty skills. The greatest danger I think salespeople face, and it is going stale, not having sharp skills, and that's caused by an attitude of I've heard it all before. And for people new to sales, the biggest danger is to train, but only up to a point, and then stop. You know, ongoing learning, I think, is essential to anybody who's committed to winning. And by the way, Jerry, your new online training portal, Jerry Acuff VT, I think that's a masterstroke. You know, the idea of short, thought-provoking sessions with a little comprehension test at the end is a great way to start the day. It was funny when you introduced it. When you introduced me to it, I watched quite a few of your short videos on a treadmill in Singapore. So I exercised my body and my mind at the same time. And it was a little hard, though, I've got to say, to do the comprehension test while you're running on a treadmill. because it's very hard when you're bouncing to push the button. So I got a couple of the answers wrong, but I got the hang of it in the end. And the reason I mention this is to point out that it's so easy to be a lifelong learner these days. I couldn't have imagined back in the 80s that I'd have the opportunity to start the day with 5 minutes or more, if I choose, of expert tuition from somebody like you, Jerry.
Yeah.
Winners never complain about training. They never avoid it. And technology makes it so much easier to train. It eliminates all the excuses for not doing so. I see our best officers and their salespeople every year at training, and they're always taking notes furiously.
Yeah, the great ones look for the great ideas. Brad Lee, who's the CEO of Lightspeed VT, who's the platform that I use, who's a genius guy that you ought to meet just for kicks and giggles. But he says training is something you do. It's not something that you did.
Yes, good point.
And the other thing he says is that great training has 4 critical components. And this is one of the reasons why I think you've been successful. One is it has world-class content. And your content is world-class. The second thing it has is repetition. And so because you have all of these resources available for people, and you have these programs that you can put people on, they get the repetition. The third thing is practice, because it's actually your whole idea of skill development, competence, action. And then the last thing is accountability. Well, in real estate, the ultimate accountability is, did you succeed or did you not succeed? So what I find is that one of the reasons why people don't get a lot out of training, whether they're new or they're widely experienced, is they're not getting all 4 of those things. Most of them are getting entertainment. In fact, I have clients who'll call me and say, we want you to give a speech, and I'll say, well, how are we going to follow up on the training? Well, we don't need any follow-up. And I said, well, then understand this. What you are paying me to do is to entertain you. Now, I have to promise you, I'm a really good entertainer. I'm really funny. I'm powerful at the end, and I'm going to charge you. But you're not training anybody. I mean, if you're going to train somebody, you have to do those other things.
I'd also add to those 4 things probably structured and systemized. I'll give you an example. With your online training, Jerry Acuff VT, you start off and you're talking about a definition of selling. What is selling? And then you build on that, don't you? So you build on the lessons. So every day you've got something that's something thought-provoking, but it builds on the previous lessons. So there's a structure to it. It takes you virtually from what is selling to how to sell expertly, putting the importance on the relationship. So there's a structure to it. A lot of times I think people go for the free stuff. So you can pick some good random, you can look at a TED Talk, and you'll get some things out of that. You can look at, there's lots of free stuff on the internet. But sometimes what you need to do, and I think a lot of the times what you need to do, is you need to invest in training from people that you trust, and you need to get the flavour of that training, and you need to get the structure. So start at lesson 1, work your way right through. I mean, some of our clients have been with us for 20 years, and we've been growing together in our careers all of that time, and so they don't hop from one sort of training to another. And this is what I liked about Jerry Acuff VT, is that you can start with a lesson, and then each lesson builds on the one before. You get a structure to it. It's systemized.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So how important is goal setting in the real estate business?
Goal setting, I think, is important in life. I mean, we talk about being lifelong learners, but I tell you, when I first started in sales, and this was back in the 80s, I went into sales in the early 80s. I was told by my sales manager that 2 things were compulsory in the company. He said prospecting and training, and we attended training regularly, often at our own expense. And around then I started devouring books, and I've done so ever since. But one day back in 1983, I saw Tom Hopkins speak, and I said, one day I'm going to do that. And I suppose, if you like, that was my that was my first goal. But
Right.
it wasn't my first foray into goal setting. The biggest benefit of goal setting for me came not long after I turned 40. I made some stupid business decisions, Jerry, and I took my family a whisker away from bankruptcy. Now, up until that point, I'd played with goal setting, but I never committed any to paper. I guess I was scared of failing, afraid to look that man in the mirror who stared back at me every morning in the bathroom and saying to that person, I failed. And so I avoided setting goals. And this brings us back to knowledge, practice, and skill. I knew about goal setting. I knew how important goal setting was. I even knew how to set goals, but I wasn't skilled at goal setting because I'd never done it. Now, then my back was to the wall. I was looking down the barrel of being 40. It was my next major birthday. We were nearly bankrupt. And not long before then, I'd met Bill Nasby, the Canadian sales trainer who wrote the program, Your Path to Deliberate Creation. Bill passed away at Christmas, but I'll always be grateful to him. He gave me the tools to set goals, and he gave me the how-to about setting goals. And he personally gave me the encouragement to commit pen to paper. Now, all up, in those early days, I spent 100 hours on my first goals. As I said, I was nearly 40, bankrupt. And not only that, I talked my wife into leaving her nursing job that she'd had for 10 years and coming into business with me. So when we closed that business, we had no cash, we had no credit, and the two breadwinners in our families had no jobs. In our family had no jobs. And so that was a pretty, they were dire financial straits, I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting, though. Yeah, it was interesting, though. Right back then, I learned the difference between being broke and being poor. Being broke, it means you have no money. Being poor is a lot more than that. It was when I started to set goals, I stopped feeling poor. The interesting part about it all was that in the midst of financial despair, which we were at the time, the moment I set goals, I felt in control. I was in control because I had a plan. I remember a financial planner said to me at the time, he said, Gary, I admire your attitude. You're in a lot of trouble, but you're so positive. And I said, Bob, isn't this what we train for the tough times, so that we're ready for whatever comes at us? I still believe this. They say in calm waters, every ship has a good captain. I think we train for success and to be ready for tough times, don't you?
No, I think you're 100% right. I think, I have as you know, in Jerry FET, I have a whole section on goal setting, and I have the 5 rules for setting and achieving stretch goals. And one of the things I tell people is the person most likely to talk you out of incredible achievement is yourself. Now, that will not be the only person. And the reason you'll talk yourself out of it is that you can't see how it'll happen. And what I've learned about goal setting is that if you have faith and belief that you're capable of it, if you have faith and belief that you're worthy of it, if you really believe it's going to happen and you're willing to visualize that over and over and over again, there's this thing that the universe does, if you'll free your mind, that brings you the ideas necessary for you to achieve your goal. And that most people won't get on the path because they can't see the end of the path. They say, well, I don't know how I could ever make $100,000 a year. I don't know how I could ever go to being a district manager to running the company 5 years later. But if you understand the goal-seeking mechanism, if you understand that that's what pursuit of excellence is really built around, and that anything else is mediocrity, you'll be wildly successful. Well, Gary, I could talk to you all day, and I wish I lived next door to you, though, and I'm not moving. But I want to thank you for being a guest on our podcast. I hope you'll come back. I want to summarize just some of the key thoughts that, I have a page of notes here. So let me just summarize some of these things that I think are crucial for our listeners to remember. The pursuit of excellence is a priority. That's got to be your attitude. That's got to be your mindset. And so much flows from that. But when you have that as a mindset, then you have to marry knowledge and practice so that you can get the skill necessary to develop so that you can go out and do competent action. Gary also made it really clear that curiosity is one of the keys to continually being successful, to continually seek out new ideas that can help us be more successful. He also talked about the fact that we're in the people business, and every business that we're in is the people business. I say to people, you got to treat everybody like they're important because they are. And you never know who you're talking to. You never know who they know. You never know how they can influence you. My guess is Bill Gates' mother didn't know that she would lead her son to billionaire status by having that conversation. I'm sure she believed in her son, and I'm sure she was passionate about having that conversation. You got a gift to get. And I do think that Zig Ziglar says you get everything in life you want if you get enough. If you give enough, you get everything in life that you want if you help enough other people get what they want. I loved your fifth component of structured and systemized, and I'm going to add that to it. The last thing I'd say is, I watched Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, and you mentioned TED Talks earlier, and hers, I think, is the number one watched TED Talk. It's on human transformation. What's interesting about her TED Talk is the last slide. And in almost every presentation that I make, especially to very experienced people, because you talked about this trap that experienced people, go into that I can't learn anymore. I always start by using her slide by just saying, tiny tweaks create huge impact. And if you're really good at what you do, and you're already a 96 or a 97, why not go to be a 98 or a 99? Because those small differences create huge impact. It's not that you're looking for big ideas. It's that you're looking for ideas that if you're smart enough to implement them, they can make you more successful. So, Gary Pittard, my dear friend, thank you for joining us from New Zealand. I wish you all the success in the world, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. And with that, I'll end the show by saying what I always say when we end this show: be incredible at whatever you do.
RNCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.